background regarding the work that we've been doing in terms of the financial review of Rock Terrace. And then board members have received both a copy of the recent audit that's come out as well as the response from the principal. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about the work that we've done in terms of, and I think this is reflective of the previous discussions about when there are issues at a school, what do we do in order to make sure that those problems are dealt with and don't continue in the future. In July, we reported to the board that we had completed our initial investigation into the handling of money provided for students with disabilities at Rock Terrace as part of both their transition program and the work program at the school. Again, since that time, the audit has been completed, so hopefully the board you've had a chance to take a look at that, as well as the responses to each of those findings. And then, as board members know, as we indicated in July, the state's attorney's office has been asked to come in and help with the investigation, and that is ongoing, and we're cooperating forward with their investigation. As we reported in July, at that time there didn't appear to be any attempt on the part of Rock Terrace staff to intentionally defraud students and their families of funds provided to students as part of the educational programs. However, as part of the investigation, we did find that the program was poorly managed and the money was inappropriately used to support educational programs. So part of what we'll also talk about is, in terms of our findings and on a go-forward basis, what we think should happen. The investigation also revealed some broader policy and practice questions for MCPS, and so that we really have to resolve before we continue with the payment of stipends to students in these programs. Just a little bit of background. Rock Terrace is similar to other schools and different than other schools in terms of their work programs. The similarity is that there is a transition to work program for the students who are basically in the upper school or the transition program. And these students, as part of the program, participate in transition to work programs. We have similar programs in most of our schools, and these are programs where the students actually leave the building and go to a giant or another organization to work. They're not taking a job. It's really an activity to give them experience, and the students receive a stipend for their work. The stipend has been $3.65 for the day, whether it's a couple hours, a half a day, or part of the day. And those students, as students in other schools, actually have gone through a hiring process with MCPS. They go to human resources, they go through an interview process. Once they get hired, Sue treats them as treats them as employees, and so they go on the payroll, and they actually then get reported on time in attendance. They get bi-weekly pay advice, direct deposit as employees, and I'll get back to this in a minute. I mean, part of what we need to look at is how we actually handle those dollars going into the future, because we have significant questions about whether they should actually be treated as pay and reported to the federal government. And so I'll come back to that in a couple of minutes. Another part of the program that really distinguishes Rock Terrace from other schools is that they have school-based programs for the students who are in the other two programs. So Rock Terrace has a middle school program, a high school program, and then this program for the students who are in the upper school transition program. And so for the schoolwork experiences, we have a horticulture program, an office skills and practices program, and a home survival skills program. Students participate in these programs. The programs actually may generate some income. They have a culinary arts program. They have some woodworking, some office work. They do shredding of materials so they can generate some revenue. And then students have been paid various rates in the past, maybe 70 cents, 80 cents, $1 for participation in these programs. Again, these funds were, let me go back, the funds for the transition to work program are actually MCPS funds. So we budget those dollars that are then paid to the students for as stipends to participate in these programs. Funds provided in these programs are actually generated out of the revenues that are generated from the programs, the culinary arts and other programs. Again, we are taking a look at both of those in terms of both the way in which, the appropriateness of them, the way in which they're managed, the way in which, how the funds are distributed. And so that's something we have given to an attorney to look at case law to try to provide us with an opinion about whether or not we should be treated, any of these dollars should be treated as wages or not. We had talked, and I think I shared with the board previously, we had talked about looking at getting an IRS ruling, but knowing how long it takes to get IRS rulings. We're hoping that we can get out of case law and understanding. And so hopefully we're going to have that sooner rather than later, because there is, particularly for the transition to work program, I think there's a good reason to provide some small stipend for the students to participate in the program, so they can see that they're earning something for it, and it really makes it, I think, for the kids much more real in terms of getting them ready to go into the workforce. Again, the thing we found in the review of the management of the funds was that the funds were actually often being used for program purposes, even though they were going into the accounts of the students. They were then taken out and used for program purposes. Even as well-intentioned as they may have been in terms of using the money to support the programs that benefited the students, it really wasn't an appropriate use of these funds. It also, was inappropriate not to completely inform the parents. I mean, as we do with any other transition to work programs, the parents are aware of it. There's a letter the parents have to sign off on it. Obviously, they have to approve of provide the money for the account that the dollars are going into, so they're well aware of where the dollars are going, and they're well aware of all the, of everything, and really our parents were the partners. We didn't find that to be the case in all the cases at Terrace. I had indicated that the state's attorney's office is involved, and we were very supportive of them getting involved because we couldn't get the bank records. And so we're interested in them getting the bank records to see the extent to which we can actually piece all the information together, get the information we need for each of the students to determine how much money at least actually went into and came out of the account. Now, we don't know when the money came out of the account, whether it went back into the school for program purposes or whether the student actually got the money. So, but hopefully we can at least piece it together to see how much money was put into those accounts and how much, so how much money was actually put into the individual individual accounts.
In terms of when you said you can't tell how much went into the school accounts, because we have other problems with a lot of the accounting that goes on at the school.
No, not necessarily. I mean, again, not goes into the school's account, but when it was taken out, how the money was actually utilized. So was it used to pay for programs, or was it used, or did the student actually take the money? Or you get, so that's the disconnect when the money came back out. It may have gone through a school account, it may not have gone through.
I mean, in terms of looking at school accounts, in theory, we should know where the money.
We know where from the audit, we know where all that money went. Again, but we don't know, this is the money that went to the students that then came out of their accounts. That's the main answer. I think in the audit, we do know, both the revenues and the disbursements were, and so we can track that piece. But again, when dollars came out of those accounts, we're not sure how they were utilized. And again, to the extent we can piece that together, it'll be helpful. And again, it may be coming to the board based on the information that the state's attorney's office will share with us in terms of additional recommendations to the board about what the next steps might be for those individual students.
Do you have any idea of the time frame for?
We connected with them last week, but we didn't get any sense when we offered them some additional assistance. We're trying to help clarify for them exactly how the work programs work, the pay worked, how this was done. So providing them all the background information that they need. And again, they're working with credit unions to try to get all the records. So, but I don't have an update right now. Other than they've sent back a brief email saying they're still working on it and thank us for our offer to provide additional assistance.
So, in getting the bank records, the issue was we had to get the approval of the parents to, or we don't need it because the state's attorney subpoenaed.
We notified them.
We notified the parents, right, but we didn't have to get their permission at that point to be able to, or the state's attorney didn't have to get their permission. We've notified them. Back to the point of understanding when monies were withdrawn from these accounts, how it was used. We have an absolute amount of money that was deposited in those accounts. Do we know what that amount is, like across all of the students?
No.
But we
But
know,
that's what we're trying to get.
That's part of what I'm assuming we're gonna get when the state's attorney goes through and does
We
for rental court.
We have a lot of the records that you certainly increase in all of the accounts. That's what we have all of the records.
Yeah, if it was MCPS stipends that come from MCPS, would we have some idea how much was deposited?
Those we do, yeah. But again, the other piece of this was the curricular programs. And at some point, we certainly had the record, but then actually the credit union had a kind of a branch at the school, I guess, for a short period of time. They discontinued that. And then after that, the way in which dollars got into individual students' accounts was, I don't want to say it's complicated or whatever.
A staff member might have gone with a student or a group of students at a time.
I'm talking about the deposits, so when the dollars went in, we were at one point where the dollars were put into one student's account.
Right. And then transferred
And then
to
transferred to multiple accounts because the credit union didn't want the money to go directly into, I guess it was to, I don't know the reasons for it, but so they wanted the money to go into one student's account and then get transferred to the different student's account. So it made it much more challenging to figure out exactly what, and again,
Why
we
would they
don't.
want that?
If it was a
I
check,
mean, that is a,
the main reason I can think of is if it's a check. You can't really take a check for $100 in and say put $10 in these 10 accounts. They're gonna want you to deposit the full $100 so they have
And
a
then
trail.
distribute
And then
it.
they
And these
would
were small
transfer.
amounts, these were very small amounts of money, so, again, it just makes it more difficult for us to, that's why we need the bank records to see if we
Right.
can actually, put all the pieces
Together.
So you're right, for the MCPS dollars, we definitely have those records, so we know exactly what was going in. But for what was coming out of the IAF for the students in the curricular account, it was different.
How many years back are we going?
That was more than that. I think the records went back to 2004 or 5. I think it was back. I think it was 2004. And again, from the, and I'll say to the best we could put together the information, complete data going back that far. So clearly, the closer and the more accurate we have in terms of the students involved. But I think the students go back about that far. And the practices have changed a little bit over the time at the school also in terms of the numbers of kids participating in that transition to work program, and the numbers of kids participating in the curricular program. And then there were also some questions and some other changes that were made. Then there were some other programs where students actually work not in the curricular programs, but in some other programs in the school, like in the cafeteria, where previously some students have been paid for that work. My understanding is starting a year ago, they were no longer being paid for that in-school work that wasn't related to any of these other programs.
Who would pay them for in-school?
Who would pay them for in-school? Well, I'm not sure where those, I'm assuming those dollars would have been coming from the same place the dollars were coming from for the curriculum, the kids who were involved in the curricular program. But again, we're talking about a fairly limited amount of money that the students were making. Again, it was 70 or 80 cents, maybe $1 for a day. And I think one of the important things, again, getting back to what I said, is we really need to determine, these are basically a stipend. They're not meant to be wages. They're not meant to reimburse students as pay for working a job. These are to recognize that part of the program is to give students some experience with money and using money. And that's part of the learning experience, life skills that students are being are learning. So again, I'm not sure, but I would assume that probably is where they were coming from. And I don't know that there was a lot of students who were actually getting that. I do know though that when I was over at the meeting that we had in July, the cafeteria manager came up to me afterwards and talked about a student who had been working in the cafeteria and had previously been being paid, and last year wasn't paid, and she came to me to say, should they get paid or not? I really didn't know the answer, so I found a staff person at the school, and we had a conversation, and that's when I learned that they used to pay these students, but they stopped paying them. So and that's more like a WOC type program in that case. So it's different than these curricular programs. It's different than transition to work. It's probably more like a WOC program, which, as you know, students generally don't get paid for WOC programs.
We have transition programs at other schools. Does this issue have implications beyond Rock Terrace?
No, as we've looked at them, we don't, we think everything has been fine. We have clear guidelines, and again, those students go through the same process of going to HR, going through the interview process, getting hired, being put on our payroll system. And so there are clear guidelines in terms of staff letters to parents, getting the bank accounts deposited, we understand, the parents have to sign off on this, so we're getting the bank account, so the dollars will be deposited, so, and everything's been put on hold. So it's not just at this school, we put all the payment of these stipends to students in the transition work programs on hold for the time being until we can get a ruling or an opinion about whether or not they should be treated as wages. My belief is they should not be. We probably should have never been really treating them as wages, but we have to take it.
I know hindsight's always 20/20. In retrospect, are there some areas here that the audit process could have addressed or in the future can address?
I've thought about that. I'm not sure if the dollars, again, so the significant issue here is when the dollars went into the credit union accounts, once they came out, how they were utilized, and that whole process of the dollars that came out of that account. So I don't know, Roger may respond, but I think in terms of looking at the dollars going in and how all that worked, looking at the revenue coming in, looking at the payments and expenditures, differences in ownership. I think there's certainly a lesson learned, and again, I also want to say, I'm not sure, I think we learned a significant lesson, and we're going to clearly look at how Terrace is handling that, and we'll get back to that in a minute, but I don't know that we have other situations where there's similar situations in schools, but I think in terms of looking at the audit practices, I think it is something we need to take a look at to make sure that we're clear if there are programs where students are participating in any type of activity where there are stipends or amounts given to them, that they're done appropriately, and if that is something we need to definitely take a look at. And I think the suggestion has been made that you put questions in your protocol or your procedures when you're going out to schools for something more to look at. So adding to the list of questions to make sure, so I think that is certainly something we need to do. Again, so since the July, you have received a copy of the audit report. Send that to you on Friday, as well as the principal's response. I think one of the important things,
Getting back to the student accounts, is there, when you said you're going to be coming back, at some point, is there, to the extent that we are able to figure out, what went in, what went out, whether or not the student just withdrew it for their own use as opposed to it being withdrawn for school use, is the understanding, or is this something you'd be coming back for, like, will we be reimbursing the students for money that was inappropriately taken out?
I would like to say that we will be able to do that. So to the extent we can piece things together and feel, I don't want to say confident, because I know we're not going to be confident, but comfortable in the numbers. If we can do that, I certainly think it would be appropriate.
Is that something you'd be coming back to us
Right.
for, or
No, I think
in terms of,
right,
is
if we
that
can
something
do
you
it,
just?
certainly come back to the superintendent and to the board to have that conversation, because it's going to be, the money would have to, MCPS would have to come up with money to do that, but I don't think it's inappropriate.
So, I'm sorry, I know we just got a bunch of questions.
That's okay.
Do we have a sense, I'm just trying to understand, seeing this from the outside, in these individual student accounts, do we have even a ballpark of how much money we're talking? And there's kind of a series of questions I have. One is that there may be students who have had accounts over years, right? So they may have accumulated funds. what then happened with those student accounts, for example, when the students graduated from or moved away from, or no longer attended Rock Terrace, had been in the program and, or, had an account but moved on for a variety of reasons. We know what happened to those accounts. And then, and again, I've got to just, these accounts were for the individual student. It could only be accessed by the individual student, or in fact were the adults, able to get into those accounts. For example, yes, before my children were 18 years old, they couldn't get accounts, right?
So part of the inappropriateness of what was done was that the adults on the accounts were sometimes staff members or sometimes just the principal. And parents were aware of these accounts. And so that certainly is a significant issue. And in terms of, and then as a result of that, certainly if the parent was on the account, they should be aware of the account, the money in it. In this case, when they weren't, there was really nobody kind of tracking those accounts, and so there were students who left the program. The dollars, there may have still been a couple dollars in there. I think there were some charges still being going. Some were just lack of activity. Right. By that, which reminded me that I had this small account at the credit union that I needed to take care of for the same reason. Because they maybe have, because I had a loan there, they maybe have an account there, so there wasn't management of those accounts. An extensive amount of work has gone on to work with the staff, and if you look at the principal's response, you will see that a lot of things have already happened. We have, Mr. Lyles has been involved with it, Sue's office has been involved, Mickey's office has been involved in terms of reviewing all of the activities over there to make sure that they have the support they need, and to do training. And we talked before about what do you do in the school. So Sue's actually offered to go do training and has done some training this afternoon, done some training with staff in terms of their responsibilities to manage funds. We've looked at the level of work, because one of the questions that was raised was, would this have happened if the fiscal person that was at the school, if the position hadn't been eliminated in 2010? And so staff still has a responsibility, whether there's a position there or not, to make sure that these things are all handled appropriately. But we are taking a look at the level of work to see whether or not we need to provide them with some additional support. And we've been talking about assigning a visiting bookkeeper
We have.
to the school to provide them with some additional support. So we're trying to assess exactly what the workload is, being clear to them about what the expectations are. So just as all the things that you've seen, both in terms of what's come out of the audit as well as just general fiscal management, what the expectations are, to make sure that the staff at the school are knowledgeable, understand it, and then also have the skills to be able to do the work. And as Mr. Barkley said, the processes are in place. The processes are clearly understood, and the people are following those processes. And then making sure that we're going in and monitoring it to make sure that, so providing some level of oversight to make sure that things are going the way that they're planning to do, so that, and again, this will be an ongoing conversation with the principal in she's very well aware of this. Mr. Lau will be having conversations with her to make sure that, one, this is being followed, and that if additional support is needed, that we can provide that additional support. I don't know, Sue or Nikki, if you want, or Kevin, if you want to say anything else about where we are with working with the principal to implement the processes and make sure the oversight is there.
I just think that the principal's got a good handle on, after working with Roger and his shop and Vicky and everyone, that what needs to happen. And I think they're actively pursuing the training that they need, that they see there was a lack of understanding with some of the staff members and putting processes in place. The other thing is working with the special ed office and getting a really good understanding of the purpose of the programs for the academics that need to take place in the school. I think it was, for me, it was great to see all the departments come together and talk about, we can't have the audit eliminate what the kids need academically. We have to figure out how to make the money work with the academic programs and make sure that everything comes together and the kids are still getting what they need academically. And that was great for me to see all the departments working together to figure that out. So I think everyone's working together and they're in the process and they're trying to figure out how to get these academic programs together with the money and make sure that everything's held accountable.
So there were some very specific things in here in terms of missions and different things that were not received by the school. I mean, is that based on a lack of the understanding by the principal that they were supposed to be received, or was it? I mean, there was this whole thing about the extra permission, right? That wasn't received. Do we have clarity on why that might have been? I mean, it just seems like there's a lot of stuff here. So you've got, on the one hand, the inappropriateness of the way these accounts were opened and managed. Then there's just the other piece, and that's unique to this school. I don't know any other schools that have students with accounts and adults would have access to those accounts, right? That's unique. And then there are things that are more standard, which is like this commission issues and the bank statements and all of those.
Everything that could go wrong did go wrong.
Well, right. I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot there, you know. And some of this is common to the audits that you've done on other schools. And some of it's really unique to Rock Terrace and its programs. You know, and I guess the issue is how do you separate those out and kind of deal with them, because I understand the frustration that many parents would have finding out that their child has some bank account that they don't know about, and some other adult has had access to it, and that erodes the trust that parents would have in us, and that is just incredibly inappropriate and needs to be addressed. And I think that we're getting there. But then there's just this basic stuff.
I think I can speak a little bit to that. When we all met, all the officers met together at a table and we looked at the audit report, specifically case by case, and we kind of looked at what category does this fall in, and then how do we fix it. And I think for the day-to-day operations, we're addressing it with trainings and we're addressing it with processes being put into place that are at schools. We looked at, I know that the principal was giving some packets from other schools on how they handle field trips and how they handle money and other issues that are typical in all high schools.
Right.
And so those issues are being addressed, with a systematic approach. With the issues that are specific to Rock Terrace, as far as the special ed issues, that we're still working on. We're working on with Chris Richardson's office, with money management, and trying to figure out really where does the curriculum come in, what type of learning needs to take place, and because I know we want to quick to jump to, you know, we could use this online payment right away, but if the idea is for the students to take money, collect it at the bistro, make the change and give it back, then the fix that we would address maybe in another school doesn't work at Rock Terrace. So that's where we're looking at, you know, how do we match the fix with the curriculum?
Do we have a target date for getting all of that together, or does that hinge on the completion of the investigation and other areas? Because I guess what I'm concerned about, there's significant anxiety, appears to be significant anxiety within some parts of the parent community. There are a lot of allegations out there, a lot of concerns, and I fear that, be it right or wrong, we've been kind of cast in a role of looking like we're dragging our feet. And I'm not sure that's accurate or not, but I was just wondering, do we have a target date somewhere down the road where we'll be able to say, yes, you know, this took place and this is in place for the future, and we kind of move forward? Or do you
It doesn't depend on the investigation, that's really separate. Our goal was, in terms of these financial pieces that Kevin talked about, that we had them in place at the beginning of the year, and we've really done that. I think the curricular pieces, they're looking at right now.
We're working on it right now. Like, the principal wants it in place yesterday.
Right.
And so we're really figuring out exactly, you know, how do we get it in place right away?
Now, what's
And
going to...
we're working with Chris Richardson.
I mean, your investigation will dictate if we are going to be refunding any of the money in these accounts.
Right, that's really different than this.
Right.
You know, the other piece that is we really have to wait on is this determination about whether any of the payments to students, any of the stipends to students, needs to be treated as wages or not. And so we're really waiting until we get that to get to the payment piece to the students, but the rest of it can certainly,
Yeah.
program pieces can certainly go on.
The general fiscal operations, the IAF fund, which is what you've heard the audits about, the visiting bookkeeper began going weekly last week or the week before. Roger and I were there last week and met with each of the 4 main business line sponsors: horticulture, wood shop, the mailing, shredding, processing, and the catering, cafeteria. Those, and talked through, and with the principal, talked through what it is they were trying to achieve with the students, who their customers were, how they handled money, and began that conversation of saying, let's refocus on the students, and what is it you need students to be doing, and how do we build business processes to support that with the internal controls, with the separation of duties, with the proper cash handling.
Right, and the action timeline that you provided is really specific and has, you know, very targeted dates in there.
And we're going back to Roger and I are going back to the staff meeting this afternoon to talk about proper cash handling, whether it's fundraisers or field trips or any other funds that a teacher touches that comes into the school.
Do we anticipate any follow-up meetings with parents?
Yes, I made a commitment after the meeting in July, I made a commitment that we would continue to meet with parent leadership and to give them updates. And so we certainly intend to do that.
I guess to that point, thank you, Mike, for raising that. I guess the issue becomes, how do you regain the trust of parents? Because the reality is, and I know if I was in a situation and my child was in school like that or a situation where an adult had that kind of access, it would be very difficult for me to trust that, folks are working in my kid's interest. And I understand what we're trying to do, but just the way it's been done has really just not worked out well. And that's a mild way of putting it. And I do think that we need to figure out the appropriate way to take responsibility for what we've done and effectively apologize and move forward and correct it. I'm clear, and I think that you know, what I'm hearing, or what we're hearing, is that folks are working to correct it and take it very seriously. But I do think that another part of this is the in some ways our failure, it may have been in understanding kind of right hand and left hand, knowing what was going on, kind of a situation, or it may have been the you know, the principal not, and I'm not quite sure why they wouldn't understand what the impact of some of these actions may have been, or what emotions would be elicited when it was clear that the ways that things were being done. But I think we have to be very careful as we move forward. And I appreciate us getting the update, you know, but I just think that we owe these parents and these young people the respect of taking account for what we did and did not do. You know?
So we fully, agree with that, and obviously taken some significant steps to try to do that, but I think it will take a little time to actually get the trust back.
Right.
But I think with the new principal, with Kevin working closely and Dr. Guerin working closely with the new principal, and all the work that's been done to date, and more work to do to make sure that, and it's not, that they're clear about, what we're doing, and again, it's with all the staff at the school too, so it's not just with the parents, but it's with the staff, and getting them having a clear understanding of what the expectations are, what we're doing, and that we really need to rebuild the relationships and the partnerships we have with the parents. I mean, it's a school that really needs to engage the parents closely and have them closely involved. And communication with the parents is, constant communication is really critical. So it's something that all that needs to be rebuilt, and I think we're confident with the new leadership in the school that can happen.
I would just like to add, I agree, and you mentioned the meetings with the school leadership, but I think at some point in repairing these feelings, I think the average parent sometimes deals with the school and maybe doesn't see the larger picture of where the system comes in. So I would hope that sometimes, and I know these community meetings can be challenging, but at some point, in addition to the leadership, there might be an opportunity to meet with the entire parent group or those interested. Because I think we really have to go out of our way to clean the slate as best we can as we try to repair, what has been done. One last question, and it might have been someplace I didn't notice. There was an issue, or some people have brought up some concerns about a class trip. Is that also under investigation?
So the class trip, as far as for this year, is going to continue because people's paid some money. Some parents have paid some money to go to the trip, and if we cancel the trip, then they would be out on their money. And that's not right, because they started collecting it last year. But we're going to run it. The trip's going to operate like they do in regular, like more traditional high schools. And the fact that, the travel agent will run the trip, and the trip will run through there, and the money will all go through the travel agent, instead of coming through the school collecting all the money, and the school organizing everything, and then working with the travel agency as the middleman. So They're in the process right now of meeting with the parents that are signed on to go to the trip, to explain this new process. The the faculty member who was in charge of the trip is working with the travel agency, and he will be their contact, and it will no longer be the school, the money won't go in through the school.
So it'll be similar to, again, the way trips are run through lots of other schools, and it's really kind of independent. We run into challenges with trips going through lots of schools. As you know, as a high school principal, you have a number of them going on probably where a staff member may be kind of working with the travel company to organize a trip for the French club or some other club, and so we just want to make sure it's separate from what's going on at the school. We certainly didn't find anything inappropriate in terms of the previous trips. The only thing that was inappropriate was some individuals, not all, but some individuals were actually paying money to the school, and then the school was writing a check to the travel company. And those dollars, as Kevin's described, are all going to go directly to the travel company. So like other trips, they can organize them, staff members go on.
I think the concern I heard was that either IAF or money from these student accounts was used to pay for this trip in the past. And it sounds like that part didn't occur.
The only part that might have occurred was the IAF may have been used because some people were paying money directly into the school, and then the school was writing a check to the tour company, as opposed to going directly to the tour company.
So if you have bad accounting on what came into the school and what was distributed from the school, you got perception issues just as much as actual. There may have been actual issues, but just because it's coming through the school,
It should be completely separated from. And again, as Kevin said, we had looked at canceling this year's trip, but after seeing that there was a penalty for discontinuing the trip, we decided just to make sure it was completely separate from the school. And anybody who wanted to pay, and most of the people who were paying the tour company directly, but everybody would now be paying the tour company.
I know at one point there was some discussion that the cost of these accounts, and I guess the function of the question whether or not these stipend was considered income or not, whether or not families were losing benefits because of the existence of these accounts, that when they apply for benefits, suddenly they show earned income that they weren't aware of. I don't know, are we aware of that, are we following that at all? And I mean, is there any way we can, if the issue, if it becomes determined that this really wasn't income, is there any way we can provide assistance to families to make sure that
We have worked with a couple of families that this came up with on as an issue. And it wasn't just, so some of it is income, and also some of it is assets. So it's not necessarily the income piece of it, but it was also the asset that they had a checking account with a certain amount of money. So we certainly look, but I think that's something as we go forward, other parents need to be aware of this, if their students are participating in this program, that it could affect their supplemental security income. And so we have to be very clear when we're setting up a bank account, when we're getting a stipend, whether it's wages or not, that we need to have them understand that if there's any implications regarding their SSI, we need to make sure that doesn't happen. So I know we've gone back with one of the families at Rock Terrace, and we work closely with the federal government to make sure that they weren't losing their benefits, and that got rectified. There was one article, there was a newspaper article about a family about their SSI benefits, but one of the things that we found out was that the student who was actually involved in this program was actually in an employment program. So the one thing I did talk about is we have a Bridges program with Marriott, where there's a few students who participate in that, and those those truly are employment programs. They're in a job, getting a regular salary for their job, and they are receiving wages from the employer. And so that, again, we need to make sure we're working with parents to make them clear that these are going to be earnings that could impact them. So I think we have an obligation to make sure that we're working with parents so that they understand. That's a little touchy. Obviously, we can't ask them if they're receiving SSI benefits or something, but we need to be able to communicate that to all parents so that they know that, then talk to us if in fact it might impact their child.
That's it.
We're on way over today.
Sorry.
So we knew we had a packed agenda, and I apologize, but we had a bunch of stuff that we wanted to bring in. So, and I don't think we've had a meeting for a few months. So, but we did have a lot to talk about.
That was very helpful.
Thank you.
The next meeting will be the annual reports of the auditors and actuaries.
Gotta love those actuaries.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, folks.